The shadow of the gods fell heavy upon the House of Atreus, a dynasty eternally stained by the blood of its own kin. The cycle began not with Atreus, but with his infamous grandfather, Tantalus, a son of Zeus himself. Elevated to dine at Olympus, Tantalus, in a monstrous act of hubris, sought to test the gods' omniscience. He slaughtered his own son, Pelops, cooked him, and served the mutilated remains in a stew to his divine guests. The gods, of course, were not deceived. They recoiled in horror, save for Demeter, who, distracted by the loss of her daughter Persephone, unknowingly ate a sliver of the shoulder. Tantalus was cast into the underworld, doomed to eternal torment, standing in a pool of water that receded when he bent to drink, and beneath fruit that withdrew when he reached to eat. But the curse he unleashed, the violation of the sacred bonds of family, was destined to follow his line through the ages. Pelops was miraculously restored to life by the gods, given an ivory shoulder to replace the missing piece. He grew to manhood and sought the hand of Hippodamia, daughter of King Oenomos. To win her, Pelops had to defeat the king in a rigged chariot race, which he accomplished through betrayal, causing the death of Oenomos and, later, the death of his accomplice, Myrtilus. As Myrtilus died, he hurled a curse upon Pelops and his descendants, a curse for treachery that would meet the original curse of cannibalism, ensuring a festering malignancy upon the family soul. The curse next fastened onto the twin sons of Pelops, Atreus and Thyestes. Driven from their home, they eventually came to Mycenae, where they struggled for the throne. The rivalry was not political but deeply personal, rooted in greed and lust. The gods decreed that the rightful king would possess a golden fleeced ram, a divine sign. Atreus, who had the ram, foolishly boasted of the sign. Thyestes, driven by envy and malice, seduced Atreus's wife, Aerope, and convinced her to steal the ram. Atreus, initially exiled, returned with the aid of the oracle and demanded his brother return, feigning reconciliation. He prepared a magnificent banquet, but the feast was a horror lifted from the memory of Tantalus. Atreus had murdered the 3 young sons of Thyestes, cooked their bodies, and served them to their unwitting father. When Thyestes had eaten his fill, Atreus brought out the heads and hands of the boys to reveal the unspeakable crime. Thyestes shrieked in his agony, calling upon the Furies, the ancient goddesses of vengeance, to haunt the house of Atreus forever. He fled, taking with him his last remaining daughter, Pelopeia. Later, an oracle told Thyestes that he must have a son with his own daughter to conceive the instrument of Atreus's downfall. In the darkness, unknowingly, he raped Pelopeia. The resulting son, Aegisthus, would grow up in ignorance of his true parentage, eventually discovering the truth and becoming the final, terrible tool of Thyestes' revenge, killing Atreus as foretold. The curse now moved to the next generation. Agamemnon and Menelaus, the sons of Atreus, and Clytemnestra and Helen, the daughters of Sparta. Menelaus married Helen, whose abduction by Paris ignited the Trojan War. Agamemnon, the High King of Mycenae, led the Greek armada. The fleet, however, was becalmed at Aulis, unable to sail. The seer Calchas revealed that the goddess Artemis was offended because Agamemnon had boasted of his hunting prowess. The only way to lift the winds was to sacrifice his own eldest daughter, Iphigenia. The horror of the ancestral sin resurfaced, a father sacrificing his child for selfish ambition. Agamemnon lured Iphigenia to Aulis under the false pretense of marrying her to Achilles, and there, he held her down and let the priests' knife fall. Though some say Artemis snatched her away at the last moment, the damage was done. Clytemnestra, Iphigenia's mother and Agamemnon's queen, never forgave him. The decade-long war was her decade of simmering, murderous resentment. While Agamemnon was at Troy, Clytemnestra took the exiled Aegisthus, the son of incest and the grandson of Thyestes, as her lover. They ruled Mycenae and plotted their vengeance, a double satisfaction for both the murdered Thyestine children and the sacrificed Iphigenia. When Agamemnon finally returned, triumphant and glorious, bringing with him the Trojan princess and prophetess Cassandra as his war prize, he walked unknowingly into a spider's web. Clytemnestra welcomed him with false warmth, leading him to his bath. As he lay naked and helpless, she threw a net over him and, with Aegisthus aiding her, struck him down with an axe. Cassandra, waiting outside, foretold her own imminent death and the doom of the house, a prophecy none believed until Clytemnestra emerged, standing over the bloody corpses of her husband and his concubine, declaring the act was justice for her lost daughter. The cycle demanded further payment. Agamemnon's remaining children, Electra and Orestes, were now the focus of the curse. Electra, consumed by hatred for her mother, lived in exile and prayed obsessively for her brother's return. Orestes, raised in secret outside Mycenae, finally returned years later, driven by his sister's demand and the inexorable command of the god Apollo. He must avenge his father's murder, or be forever cursed. To slay a mother was a transgression beyond all human law, a sin more ancient and terrifying than regicide. But driven by filial duty and divine command, Orestes, with Electra's fanatical encouragement, murdered both Aegisthus and his own mother, Clytemnestra. The moment the deed was done, the Erinyes, Furies, appeared, hissing, black-garbed, winged creatures with snakes in their hair, smelling of guilt and ancient crime. They were the primal, inescapable deities of vengeance for matricide. While humans and gods might forgive, the Furies would not. They chased Orestes across the known world, their horrifying presence driving him to madness. Orestes sought refuge at the temple of Apollo, who offered him purification and sent him to Athens to stand trial before the city's wise goddess, Athena. The final act of the curse was a court of law. Athena convened the first ever jury trial, the Areopagus, to decide Orestes' fate. The Furies argued for the absolute necessity of blood vengeance, a life for a life, a mother for a mother, to preserve the cosmic order. Apollo argued that a husband's life was paramount, and that the father's blood was more sacred than the mother's. The jury was split. Athena, casting the deciding vote, sided with Orestes, declaring that the law of the city must supersede the primal law of the blood feud. Orestes was acquitted, but the Furies, robbed of the due, threatened to unleash pestilence and devastation upon Athens. Athena, through wisdom and persuasion, did not banish them. Instead, she placated them, transforming them from the vengeful Erinyes into the benevolent Eumenides, the kindly ones, goddesses of justice and civic order, assigning them a place of honor beneath the city. The blood debt was finally paid. The generational cycle of cannibalism, incest, betrayal, and murder that had haunted the House of Atreus from Tantalus to Orestes was broken, dissolved not by another act of violence, but by the establishment of law and justice. The curse had finally been lifted, but the horrific story of the house remains an eternal testament to the catastrophic consequences of human hubris and the enduring power of blood guilt.